For over 1100 years, this city has stood as the beating heart of Central Europe. It is one of the few major capitals on the continent that was largely spared the widespread destruction of the Second World War. Because of that, walking through these streets isn't just a tour. It is a rare glimpse into a past that has remained unbroken. What you are looking at is a living textbook of architecture, from Romanesque rotundas to Gothic towers, Renaissance palaces, and the heavy, intricate beauty of the Baroque era. It is all here, preserved side by side in a layout that has barely changed since the Middle Ages. It is so culturally significant that the entire historic centre was inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. If you want to find the pulse of Prague, you don't look for a government building or a modern skyscraper, you come here. This is the Old Town Square or Staromestský náměstí. For nearly 1,000 years, this has been the city's living room. In the 11th century, this wasn't a tourist hub. It was a marketplace, a chaotic crossroads of merchants travelling between east and west. It is strange to think that on these very stones, kings were welcomed with gold, and revolutionaries were met with the sword. Look at the ground near the Old Town Hall. You might see 27 white crosses embedded in the pavement. They mark the spot where 27 Bohemian nobles were executed in 1621, a turning point that brought the city under the rule of the Habsburgs for 300 years. It is a reminder that Prague's beauty often hides a scar or two. But today, the square is dominated by something else, that massive, dark monument in the centre. That is Jan Hus. He was a reformer who fought for truth a full century before Martin Luther. He was burned at the stake in 1415, but his legacy and his statue here remains a symbol of Czech independence and resistance. And just a few steps away, you see the crowds gathering. Every hour, hundreds of people stop whatever they are doing, crane their necks, and wait. They are waiting for the Orlo, the Prague Astronomical Clock. This is the oldest functioning astronomical clock in the world. It was installed in 1410. When the hour strikes, you will see the Walk of the Apostles, 12 wooden figures appearing in the windows. But look lower at the golden dial. It doesn't just tell time, it shows the medieval view of the universe. The Earth is in the centre and the sun and moon revolve around it. It tracks the phases of the moon, the sun's position in the zodiac, and even Old Czech time, where the day ends at sunset. It is a mechanical computer from the Middle Ages, still calculating the heavens today. There is a famous legend about this clock. They say the city councillors were so jealous of its beauty that they blinded the clockmaker, Master Hannes, so he could never build another one for anyone else. In revenge, the blind master supposedly climbed the tower and jammed the gears, stopping the clock for 100 years. Leaving the square behind, let's talk about why we are actually here. Why does the world love Prague so much? Before 1989, behind the Iron Curtain. This city was a bit of a mystery to the West, but in the decades since the Velvet Revolution, Prague has exploded in popularity. Today, it consistently ranks as one of the most visited cities in Europe, often welcoming over 6 to 8 million visitors a year. It is easy to see why Prague is incredibly walkable. Unlike London or Paris, where you might need a metro to jump between landmarks, here the history is compact. You can walk from the 10th century to the 20th century in about 15 minutes. But there is also the safety factor. The Czech Republic is frequently ranked as one of the safest countries in the world. That sense of security gives the city a very relaxed rhythm. You don't feel the frantic rush here that you might feel in other capitals. People take their time. They sit in cafes. They drink beer, which, by the way, is a matter of national pride. The Czechs consume more beer per capita than anyone else on earth. It is not just a drink, it is part of the social fabric. To understand Prague, you have to understand that it is a survivor. In the 14th century, under Emperor Charles IV, this was the capital of the Holy Roman Empire. Charles was obsessed with making Prague the new Rome. He founded the university, built the bridge that bears his name, and laid out the new town. That was the Golden Age. But Prague is also a city of windows. Literally, the word defenestration, the act of throwing someone out of a window, is practically a political tradition here. It happened in 1419 and again in 1618, which actually started the 30 Years' War. Fast forward to the 20th century, and the story gets darker. Nazi occupation in 1939 was followed by decades of communist rule after World War II during those grey years. The city was frozen in time. Development stopped while other European cities were modernizing and rebuilding. Prague just waited. But that stagnation is exactly why it is so beautiful today. Because there was no money to tear down old buildings and build glass skyscrapers, the historic centre remained untouched. When the Iron Curtain fell in 1989, the world woke up and realised that Prague was a perfectly preserved museum of European history. Leaving the winding streets of the old town, we arrive at the gateway to the river. This is the Old Town Bridge Tower. Look at the detail on the stonework. Historians consider this one of the most beautiful Gothic gateways in the world. For centuries, this was the definitive entrance for Czech kings on their coronation procession. Passing under this arch meant you were entering the presence of royalty. If the square is the heart of Prague, this bridge is its spine. It connects the old town on the right bank to the lesser town and the castle on the left. But this isn't just a way to cross the river, it is a masterpiece of medieval engineering. Construction began here on a very specific date chosen by the king's astronomers. They believed in the power of numbers. King Charles IV laid the first stone in the year 1357, on the 9th day of the 7th month at exactly 5:31 in the morning. If you write that out, 1357975331, it creates a perfect numerical palindrome, a sequence that reads the same forwards and backwards. They believed this magic would make the bridge last forever, and considering we are walking on it nearly 700 years later, maybe they were right. As we walk further, you will notice we aren't alone. Lining the balustrades are 30 statues of saints. It feels less like a bridge and more like an open-air art gallery suspended over the water. Most of these are Baroque masterpieces from the 1700s, placed here to inspire the passers-by. But there is one statue you must stop for. It is the oldest one on the bridge, the only one made of bronze, and you will know it by the crowd gathered around it. This is St. John of Nepomuk. His story is the most dramatic of them all. He was a priest in the 14th century who served the Queen. The legend says the king, Wenceslas IV, was a jealous man. He demanded to know what the Queen had confessed in private. John refused to break the seal of confession. In a rage, the king had him tortured and thrown off this very bridge into the river Vltava. Standing here in the middle of the river, take a moment to look up. That view, the castle rising above the red roofs of the lesser town, is one of the most famous skylines in Europe. For centuries, this bridge was the only way to cross the Vltava. Farmers, soldiers, kings and merchants all walked this same path. It survived the great floods of 1890 and 2002. It witnessed the end of wars and the dawn of revolutions. It is a place where history feels heavy, but the atmosphere is light. You have jazz musicians playing, artists painting caricatures, and the wind coming off the water. It is the perfect bridge between the two halves of this magical city. Welcome to the other side. This is Mala Strana. In English, we translate this as the lesser town, which sounds a bit harsh, like it is second best. But historically, it simply meant the smaller side of the river compared to the larger old town we just left. But if you look around, there is nothing lesser about it. In fact, many locals will tell you this is their favourite part of Prague. It is quieter, more romantic, and it feels like a movie set, and that is no accident. You see, in 1541, a catastrophic fire swept through this entire district. It destroyed the old medieval wooden houses that stood here. While that was a tragedy at the time, it gave the architects a blank canvas. They rebuilt everything in the fashionable style of the day, Renaissance and Baroque. Because the area wasn't modernized much in the centuries that followed. What you are walking through today is a perfectly preserved Baroque pearl. It is so authentic that movies like Amadeus were filmed right here on these cobblestones, doubling for 18th century Vienna. If the Gothic cathedrals we saw earlier were about reaching for the sky with dark, sharp lines, this is the opposite. This is the definition of high Baroque. It is theatrical, emotional, and designed to overwhelm your senses. It was built by the father and son team, the Dientzenhofers, who spent decades perfecting every curve. And they didn't hold back everywhere you look. There is artificial marble, gold leaf, and statues that look like they are frozen in mid-movement. Look up at the ceiling. That painting is the apotheosis of St. Nicholas. It covers 1,500 square meters, making it one of the largest frescoes in all of Europe. The artist Johann Lucas Cracker was a master of perspective. He made the ceiling look like it opens directly into heaven. But the real soul of this building is up in the choir loft. See that white and gold organ? It has over 4,000 pipes. In 1787, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart climbed those stairs and played that very instrument during his stay in Prague. Leaving the square, we start the climb up the Royal Way. This is Nerudova Street. For centuries, this was the final leg of the coronation procession for Bohemian kings before they reached the castle. The road is actually named after Jan Neruda, a famous 19th century Czech writer who grew up right here. He wrote tales of the lesser quarter, capturing the quirky, everyday lives of the people who lived in these very houses. Halfway up the hill, tucked away in the shadows, is a place that feels like it hasn't changed since the Middle Ages. This is the Tavern U Sedmi Svabu, or at the Seven Swabians. Entering here is like stepping into a time machine. The air smells of roasted meat and open fire. It captures the atmosphere of what hospitality was like in medieval Prague: stone walls, heavy timber, and candlelight. We are now entering the Prague Castle complex, but calling it a castle is a bit misleading. This isn't just one building, it is a city within a city. According to the Guinness Book of World Records, this is the largest ancient castle complex in the world. It covers over 70,000 square meters. That is roughly the size of 7 football fields strung together. It was founded around the year 880 by Prince Borivo of the Přemyslid dynasty. Think about that, over 1100 years of history in one place. Every major architectural style of the last millennium is represented here, from Romanesque to Gothic to Baroque. For centuries, this was the seat of the kings of Bohemia and Holy Roman Emperors. Today, it is the official office of the President of the Czech Republic. If you look at the flag flying over the rooftops, that tells you the President is in the country. One of the most interesting things about this place is that it was never destroyed. While many European castles were levelled by wars or modernised beyond recognition, Prague Castle just kept growing. It survived fires, invasions and occupations, simply adding a new layer of history each time. It is a symbol of the Czech state itself, complex, resilient and enduring. Dominating the skyline is the Metropolitan Cathedral of Saints Vitus, Wenceslas and Adalbert. This is the spiritual heart of the country. When you look at it, you might think it is a pure medieval masterpiece, but the story is much more complicated. Construction began in 1344, ordered by Emperor Charles IV and his French architect Matthias of Arras. But when Charles died, wars and lack of money stopped the work. For centuries, the cathedral stood half finished with a temporary wall closing off the back. Believe it or not, what you see today was only finished in 1929, exactly 1,000 years after the death of St. Wenceslas. It took nearly 600 years to complete this building. Inside, the light is incredible. While most Gothic cathedrals have very dark, traditional stained glass, here you will see something different. Look for the window in the north nave that glows with vibrant blues and golds. That was designed by Alphonse Mucha, the famous Art Nouveau painter in the 1930s. It portrays the origins of Christianity in the Slavic lands, and it brings a distinctly modern Czech artistic touch to this medieval space. But the most sacred part of the cathedral is the St. Wenceslas Chapel. The walls are covered in semi-precious stones, jasper and amethyst, set in gilded plaster. In the corner of that chapel there is a small, heavy door with 7 locks. Behind that door lies the crown chamber, holding the Bohemian crown jewels. They are strictly guarded. To open that door, 7 different people, including the president, the prime minister, and the archbishop, must come together with their 7 separate keys. Legend says that any usurper who places the crown on his head without the right to wear it will die within a year. And given the history of those who tried, I wouldn't test it. Just across from the cathedral is the old royal palace. This was the actual residence of the kings until the 16th century. The centerpiece here is the Vladislav Hall, built between 1493 and 1502 by the architect Benedict, Reg 18. It was an engineering marvel of its time. The vaulted ceiling looks like intertwined flower petals made of stone. The hall is so massive that knights used to hold jousting tournaments right here, indoors. But this palace is also the scene of one of the most famous events in European history. If we walk into the Bohemian Chancellery Room, we find a window that changed the world. On May 23, 1618, a group of Protestant nobles, angry at the Catholic emperor, stormed this room. They grabbed 2 imperial governors and their secretary and threw them out of the window. This event is known as the defenestration of Prague. That fall sparked the 30 Years' War, a conflict that devastated all of Europe.
Ma quel giorno i bambini si riescono a trattenere meglio, a sentire loro.
And now we arrive at the most colourful and perhaps the most mysterious street in Prague. This is the Golden Lane. It feels like a fairy tale village, doesn't it? These tiny houses were built right into the arches of the castle's fortification wall in the 16th century. Originally, they weren't for alchemists or artists. They were built for the castle marksmen, the sharpshooters who guarded the walls. Legend says there were originally 24 guards, but there was so little space that the houses had to be this small just to fit them all in. Later, in the 17th century, goldsmiths moved in, which is how the street got its name, Golden Lane. But before we explore the houses, we have to see where the soldiers actually worked. Let's head upstairs to the defense corridor. This wooden walkway connects the towers along the castle wall. Today, it is a spectacular museum of medieval weaponry. As you walk down this hall, you are passing centuries of military history, from heavy plate armour that made knights look like walking tanks to the terrifying halberds and crossbows used to defend the ramparts. Heading back down, let's peek inside the houses to see how people actually live. It is hard to believe, but people lived in these tiny spaces until the 1950s. The interiors you see now are recreations of different time periods. You have the goldsmith's workshop, the herbalist's room full of dried plants, and the humble quarters of the castle guards. It wasn't always glamorous. Historically, this was actually one of the poorest parts of the castle, but in the 20th century, it became a haven for writers and artists. So, whether you are looking for the ghosts of alchemists, the history of soldiers, or just a bit of literary magic, Golden Lane holds it all within these tiny walls. Just a few steps away, hidden behind high walls, we enter a completely different world. This is the Waldstein Garden. It was created in the 17th century and is one of the finest examples of early Baroque design in Prague. It was built to impress, designed in the Italian style where nature is forced into perfect geometric shapes. The first thing you will notice, besides the silence, are the residents. Peacocks roam freely here, including rare albino white peacocks that look like ghosts moving against the green hedges. Dominating the open space is the Sala Terrena, this massive open-air hall. In the summer, concerts are still held here, just as they were 400 years ago. The garden is beautiful, but it is just the backyard for something much bigger. This is the Waldstein Palace. Today, this is the home of the Senate of the Czech Republic, but it was built by one man, Albrecht von Wallenstein. Wallenstein was a fascinating character. He was the supreme commander of the imperial armies during the 30 Years' War, and he became so powerful and so wealthy that he started to rival the emperor himself. He built this palace to prove a point. He wanted something that would overshadow Prague Castle, which sits just up the hill. To build this complex, he didn't just buy a plot of land. He bought and demolished 26 houses, 6 gardens, and a brick factory. He wiped out an entire neighborhood just to build his dream home. But history has a way of being ironic. Wallenstein only enjoyed his palace for about a year. His power made him too many enemies, and in 1634 he was assassinated by his own officers on the emperor's orders. Today, the palace belongs to the people. It stands as a monument to ambition, power, and how quickly it can all be taken away. We have circled back to the lesser town square and we got lucky. It looks like we stumbled upon a market day. We decided to stop and try something fresh from one of the stalls. We went for a local pie and honestly, it was exactly what we needed. Standing here, eating this pie with the tram bells ringing in the background. This feels like the real Prague. It is not just a museum. It is a place where people live, eat, and enjoy the simple things. You cannot walk more than 50 meters in the center of Prague without smelling cinnamon and caramelized sugar. That smell is coming from this, the tradlnik. It is fascinating to watch them make it. They take strips of dough, wrap them around a thick wooden or metal stick called a tradlo, and roast it over an open flame until it is golden brown. Then it gets rolled in a mix of sugar and crushed walnuts. This is Prague's narrowest alley. It is incredibly tight, only about 50 centimeters, or just under 20 inches, wide. It is so narrow that two people cannot possibly pass each other without getting stuck. Because of that, the city actually had to install a pedestrian traffic light on both ends. Originally, this wasn't really a street for humans. It was a fire corridor built centuries ago to stop fires from spreading between the tightly packed buildings. Today, it mostly leads to a restaurant by the river, but the fun is really just the squeeze.
Ja, genau.
As we walk on these cobbles, try to imagine the noise. Today, it is peaceful, but for a long time, this was a busy highway. From 1883, horse-drawn trams rattled across this bridge. Later came electric trams, buses, and even cars. It wasn't until 1965 that the city realized the vibration was damaging the structure and finally banned traffic. So every step we take here without dodging a car is a modern luxury on a medieval bridge. This is the National Museum. It is hard to miss it, dominates the entire skyline here. It was opened in 1891, designed not just to hold artifacts, but to be a symbol of the Czech national revival. A statement that the Czech language, science, and culture were equal to anything else in Europe. Inside, it holds millions of items, from prehistoric fossils to the minerals of Bohemia, standing as a vault of the nation's memory. A short walk from the river brings us to Karlovo Náměstí, or Charles Square. Dominating the corner is the new town hall. Remember the defenestration we talked about at the castle? Well, the first one happened right here in 1419, when a mob threw the city councillors out of those tower windows onto the spears of the crowd below. Today, though, it is much more peaceful. A quiet green oasis where locals come to escape the tourist crowds of the centre. Walking along the riverbank, surrounded by Art Nouveau and Baroque masterpieces, you suddenly come face to face with something that breaks all the rules. This is the dancing house. It is shocking, isn't it? In a city famous for its medieval history, this piece of deconstructivism architecture looks like it just landed from another planet. Or, more accurately, like it is moving. The concept behind the design is a dance. If you look closely, you can distinguish a couple. The stone tower on the right is the man solid, upright, standing firm. The glass tower on the left is the woman narrow at the waist, wearing a skirt that flares out at the bottom as she leans into her partner. You cannot separate the story of Prague from the story of this river. This is the Vltava. It is the longest river in the Czech Republic, winding its way from the deep forests of the south all the way north to join the Elbe. But to the Czech people, it is much more than just water. It is a national symbol. The name itself comes from an ancient Germanic phrase, Wltava, meaning wild water. And if you look at the current swirling around the pillars of the Charles Bridge, you can see why. It has a power to it. That power has shaped the city's destiny, sometimes tragically. In August 2002, this wild water lived up to its name. A catastrophic flood, the worst in 500 years, surged through the capital. It devastated the lower parts of the city, including the zoo and the subway system. If you look at some of the buildings near the banks, you can still find small markers high up on the walls showing where the water level reached. It is a humble reminder that nature is still in charge. But mostly, the Vltava is a source of inspiration. The famous Czech composer Bedřich Smetana wrote a symphonic poem called the Moldor or Vltava that tries to capture the sound of this river in music. Every Czech child learns it in school. The music starts with two small flutes representing the cold springs in the forest and builds into a massive roaring orchestra as the river flows majestically through Prague. As we stand here watching it flow, you realize that while kings and empires rise and fall on the hills above, the Vltava just keeps moving, carrying the soul of the country with it. After leaving the riverbank, we decided to hop on a tram and head a little further south, away from the tourist centre. We are going to Vysehrad. While everyone knows the main Prague castle we saw earlier, this is actually the other castle, the high castle sitting on a rock above the Vltava. Today, Vysehrad feels less like a fortress and more like a peaceful park. It is quiet here. You don't have the crowds, you just have the wind in the trees and locals walking their dogs along the 17th century ramparts. Dominating the skyline is the Basilica of St. Peter and Paul. You can recognize it from anywhere in the city by its two black neo-Gothic spires. The bells here have a distinct sound. They chime a specific melody that echoes across the river every hour. For many locals, this place is even more special than the main castle because this is where the story of Prague actually begins. According to ancient legends, this was the seat of the first Czech princes. It is said that the mythical Princess Libas stood right here on these cliffs, looked out over the forests, and prophesied, "I see a great city whose glory will touch the stars." That city became Prague. And the view. Well, come look at the edge of the wall. Because of the bend in the river, you get a completely unique perspective looking back at the bridges and the castle in the distance. It is the perfect place to see the prophecy of Princess Libas came true. As the sun sets and the streetlights flicker on, we make our way back toward the old town. Standing here is the Powder Tower, or Prasna Brana. It looks dark and brooding in the twilight, doesn't it? This was one of the original 13 city gates. It got its name in the 17th century when it was used to store gunpowder. But long before that, it was the start of the royal route the Parth kings took on their way to the castle. The energy of the city changes when the sun goes down. The museums close and the restaurants open up. Walking through these smaller side streets, the air fills with the sound of clinking glasses and laughter. You can see people settling in for dinner, the warm light spilling out onto the cobblestones. It is that cozy, magical atmosphere that Prague does better than almost anywhere else. The history is still there, but in the evening, the city feels less like a monument and more like a home. We decided to have a little fun. We headed to a place that is famous not for what they serve, but how they serve it. This is the Výtopna railway restaurant. Now, I know this might seem a little touristy, but honestly, you have to try it at least once. The entire restaurant is a giant model railway system. There are over 900 meters of tracks winding through the dining room, crossing drawbridges, and going through tunnels. We sat down and ordered the Czech essentials, few cold beers, some fries, and a wooden board with meats and sauerkraut. And sure enough, a few minutes later, our waiter arrived. But he was a G-scale locomotive. There is something genuinely joyful about watching a little train chug up to your table carrying a pint of beer. It brings out the kid in everyone. We were sitting there smiling just as much as the children at the next table. The food was hearty, exactly what you need after walking around the city. The sauerkraut had that perfect tang, and the beer, of course, was fresh. But really, you come here for the experience. It is quirky, it is unique, and it is a perfect example of how Prague doesn't take itself too seriously. At night, Prague becomes a different city entirely. During the day, the architecture shouts for your attention. It is all about the history, the dates, the wars, and the kings. But when the sun goes down and the street lights flicker on, the history steps back and the atmosphere takes over. Look at the Church of Our Lady before Tin. In the daylight, it is imposing. Tonight, lit up against the black sky, it looks like something out of a storybook, a castle where a sleeping beauty might be waiting. This is the magic hour that writers and poets always talk about in Prague. The gas lamps, yes, many of these are still gas-powered, cast a warm yellow light that reflects off the cobblestones. It softens everything. All around us, the city is unwinding. You can hear the clinking of heavy glass mugs. The smell of roasted pork and dumplings drifts out of the tavern doors. People are sitting outside, wrapped in blankets, just watching the world go by. And here at the Astronomical Clock, you can actually stand here and hear the mechanism clicking. It has been counting these seconds for over 600 years, ticking away through the Dark Ages and the Golden Ages, indifferent to the changes around it. It is a very Czech way to end the day. There is no rush here. The locals call it pohoda, a word that doesn't translate perfectly, but means a sense of well-being, calm and contentment. You sit, you have a beer, you talk with friends, and you let the beauty of the city settle around you. Walking these streets tonight, you realize that Prague isn't just a museum of the past. It is a living, breathing place that knows how to enjoy the present. It is mysterious. Yes, it is old, certainly. But more than anything, tonight, it feels incredibly welcoming. For our final meal, we went to the Bohemia Restaurant to try the heavy hitters of Czech cuisine. We ordered some beer and 2 classics, the goulash served inside a loaf of bread and the famous confit pork knee. I have to warn you, the portions here are not for the faint of heart. The pork knee is absolutely massive, crispy on the outside and falling off the bone. It is rich, it is hearty, and honestly, it is the perfect way to end a long day of walking.
Ale nemá. Mají tady jsou do sebe.
We crossed the Charles Bridge back to the lesser town side just to grab dessert. We picked up 2 fresh tradlniks, one with chocolate, one with pistachio and ice cream. And that brings us to the end of our journey through Prague. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. And if you want to see more travel documentaries like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next adventure. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next video. Safe travels.